Hi, I'm Ann Zachary. I'm the creator of the Learn and Grow educational series and the host of this episode of Food for Thought here on our different social media platforms. And as with our previous episodes of late, the most recent episodes that we've done, today's episode comes from our online meetup classes that we do live, where we have a live audience. We take them to the presentation, and then at the end there's a Q&A, a live Q&A. This is going to be the basically a pre-recorded version of the presentation portion of what we use for that same meetup class. And it's for the benefit of the meetup folks who either come in late and miss the beginning, or they want to go back and refresh their memory because they can't quite remember something that was explained previously in the live event and they didn't think to ask the question then. But also to folks who never make it to the meetup classes at all and who just want the information right now and just want to be able to hit this video and get the information they need to move on with their day. And so we welcome everybody, and I'm very glad that you're here to share this content with us. So let's get right into this presentation. So first, just to give you a little bit of background on the Learn and Grow educational series, if you are new to us, what we focus on is evidence-based instruction of evidence-based practices in sustainability and food security. And so everything that we're teaching is evidence-based, but we're using evidence-based methodologies in order to teach it. And so rather than using social media to promote sales, which is what a for-profit model does, we're using social media to promote instruction. And so we're using the same algorithms, we're using the same strategies that are used to promote sales in order to promote the promulgation of knowledge amongst the public. And so we're trying to provide people with information that they're looking for on how to grow their own food no matter where they live, be able to take it with them if they have to move, and to do so sustainably as much as possible, as well as other aspects of living sustainably. And so this video and our online meetup classes of the same topic all come from our body of online instruction that we do to teach people these things. And so what we're focusing on today, yeah, I'll get back to our main slide, is community service through gardening. And I'm going to be taking you through a strategy that we use. It's the foundation of everything that we did, is what I started everything out on, and that's self-watering container gardening. And so I'll zoom in on this image here. You can kind of see this was an event that I conducted at a mobile home park where the folks didn't have really any kind of outdoor space for putting in what one would consider a typical type of garden, no in-ground space for growing. But this was something they could do where they could put the containers on their porches, and it was particularly a fun thing to do with the kids who lived in the park. And the owners of the park actually had us come in and conduct this event at their expense, specifically for the kids who lived in the park, which was very cool. And so there's all kinds of opportunities to use self-watering container gardening to address community service needs and do community service projects. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. So this is something I'm excited to share with you because it's like just a whole nother branch of the things that we do. So community service programs are very often involved with us when we do some kind of a community service project, but they don't have to be. But some of the places that you can go to are scouting programs, any kind of community service organization that has any kind of sponsored youth leadership programming. So, like the Kiwanis Club has Key Club or the Kiwans, and then community service clubs themselves, where you have Kiwanis and Rotary and Lions and all of these different organizations that exist to help do community service projects and benefit the local community. And then they're usually part of a much larger parent organization that helps all of the local chapters, stay organized and keep their ducks in a row paperwork wise and stay, make sure they're following a cohesive program of structure so that everything's being done legit and by the book, particularly with respect to the IRS and any kind of local ordinance that might apply to each club on a case-by-case basis. And so those guys are really great resources if you're wanting to do an event in a specific community. They've already done community events. They already know the ins and outs of putting those kinds of things together. They usually have a lot of knowledge and expertise. It's really great to partner with them to do stuff. And they're usually really excited to get behind projects that are going to benefit the community that they can associate themselves with and have their volunteers have something to go out in the community and do. So also places of worship and places of instruction, schools, whether they're public schools or private schools, charter schools, traditional school districts, doesn't matter. Lots of schools that welcome these kinds of opportunities to do some kind of community service project, especially when you're talking about food security and sustainability. That's really, and as all of this is tied to STEM. So again, evidence-based practices being taught using evidence-based practices. And so the education community is going to embrace something like this. Um, all that said, there's nothing stopping you from just getting a group of friends together and say, hey, you want to do a thing. You don't have to be associated with any of these other formal groups to do your own community service project. You can create one from scratch. And so, regardless of how you go about it, whether you're going to partner with somebody else, or this is going to be something that you and just a group of friends or family or church members or whatever the case may be, whatever place of worship you belong to, maybe you want to just like come up with something all on your own, and this is going to be part of it. So that's what I want to be able to do, is regardless of the format or the relationships you have with all the other people who are going to help you make this happen. There's a lot of it that's going to be common no matter what your configuration is. But don't limit yourself in terms of trying to figure out how you might be trying to do a community service project. Don't limit yourself just to pre-existing clubs. That might not be the right venue for you. Maybe you just really do need to do something on your own. And so, or maybe you need to partner with a youth group instead of a group of retired business people. It's just like, figure out what works best for you, and then still take the knowledge, and you can still use it regardless. But it's gives you some ideas of where you can go with it, and how you can sort of start your own program or create a project that doesn't, from scratch. So then it becomes a question of, well, if you're going to do a community service project, who's going to be the beneficiary of it? Who are the members of the community who need your help in this way? And so when we're talking about building out self-watering container gardens and giving people a method of growing food in a place where normally you might not be able to, there's all kinds of places where that might be applicable. Nursing homes, adult daycare programs, assisted living facilities, childcare providers, preschools and schools, shelters, group homes, after school programs, apartment tenant groups like the mobile home situation. I mean, it could be apartments or mobile homes, obviously, condominiums, in college dorms. I have this vision of at some point in time getting a bunch of college students who live in a dormitory or a sorority or a frat house or whatever, in some kind of shared, communal living environment, where they create a little garden that everybody helps take care of in whatever available spaces they have, and whether it's distributed across everybody's balconies, if that's their situation, or they've got an outdoor space that they can, in like a patio or something, that they can dedicate to it, or an area in the parking lot, or whatever the case may be. I mean, everybody's situation is different, but there's all kinds of situations where this can be applied and people can benefit from it. So before we get too deep in the weeds of all of these administrative concepts and all of these logistical features of how to put together a community benefit program, let's talk about the self-watering containers themselves, because they're an instrumental part of what I'm trying to share with you. You have to have that piece of it in order for all the rest of it to work. So let's talk about that for a moment. So the containers themselves, I'm going to zoom in. This is the total DIY version, only given here for the point of contrast. Because what I want you to get with the total DIY version is that you need 2 buckets, you need a PVC, you need some kind of baskety shaped thing to act as a wicking mechanism, and then you need all of these tools. You're going to have to drill, you're going to have to cut holes, you're going to make a big old mess. You're going to have to, buy things that, if you're only going to make 1 or 2 containers, you're talking about $15 a hole saw if you don't already have them. And so, for some people, this isn't practical. Certainly for doing a community service project, that's incredibly cumbersome to have all those bits and pieces to keep up with. And so though you totally can, we have the instructions on how to do that on our website. By all means, if that works better for you, go for it. And we've got separate video content that explains the how-tos of how to make a self-watering container. And that includes the total DIY version, as well as the grow bucket method I'm about to show you, which is the method we recommend for doing community service projects, just because it's a lot more efficient. And cost-wise, it's about the same as doing the total DIY version. And it has, you really don't need to get a whole bunch of things, and you don't need a whole bunch of tools. And so if you have a group of volunteers who have never done anything like this before, this is all new to you, the learning curve is much shorter doing the kit than doing a total DIY version with a bunch of tools and stuff. If you're a tool kind of person, the DIY version is not going to be intimidating to you at all. But for, trying to get a bunch of volunteers who have different skill levels to all be able to work efficiently together to bust stuff out and get stuff done, if you're trying to build out a community garden for somebody, like in a homeless shelter or something, you might be building out a fairly sizable garden with these containers, which means you're going to have a lot of people helping you put everything together. Or if you only have a few people, you don't want to burden them with too much work. You want it to make it simple. So for that reason, we rely on these grow bucket kits. And I've got a demo unit here. Let me turn off the graphic for a second so you can see. And you can see that the kit is inserted inside of this bucket, and that on the outside of this bucket, you've got a drain hole. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have water going down this refill tube here at the top, and it's going to fill up a reservoir that's full of water all the way up to this drain hole, and that's as high as the water can ever get. And unless something happens and this hole gets plugged up for some reason, when you poke it with a little stick or shoot water with the hose up in there, and it usually blows out whatever it might be, usually something pretty minor. But barring that, when the water is all the way up to the top, it can go no further, and the excess is just going to come out of this drain hole. And that's really important because this kit creates a false bottom, as you can see. Well, it's not a false bottom. It creates a new bottom to what's now the growing area. And you can see there's a crevice of space in between the exterior of the kit insert down at the bottom and the bucket itself. But there's a gap in between them, and dirt's going to fall down in that gap. And so around the perimeter of this platform, except in the part of it that's facing right here where the drain hole is, because that you want to have, you don't want dirt in front of that or it'll plug it all up. So the way that this kit looks on the inside is quite clever. So let me show you the kit itself. And these are all the pieces put together. So I'm going to disassemble it and then reassemble it. And then you can see how the parts go together to make the whole thing what it is. So first you have this platform. And on the underside of the platform are these ridges. So that when you have the platform sitting in the bucket, water is seeping out from under the edge of these ridges. And the bucket is right here. You've got this gap, this crevice in between the interior wall of the bucket and the exterior wall of the platform. And soil is going to fall on that crevice. And the water seeping out from underneath this is going to get that soil damp. It's going to make it wet. But the majority of the soil is going to be up here above it, this platform. And if the soil up above the platform ever gets too wet, gravity is going to pull water out of that soil down into the reservoir down underneath it. And so what you have is a water reservoir underneath this platform that can only get so deep because of this drain hole on the outside. And then you have this refill tube that allows you to put water into the reservoir without stripping nutrients out of the soil by top watering it. Because if you put too much water through the top of the soil, the water will drain into the reservoir, but so will a lot of particulate matter that has nutrient value for your soil, and you'll strip the nutrients out of your soil by top watering. So it's really important to, not get crazy with putting water into the soil of the plants once everything is established and you have your plants growing, because you don't want to strip those nutrients out. It turns into sediment down in your reservoir that's never going to come back up with the water when the water gets soaked back up. So you won't have a problem with hydration, but you will have a problem with nutrients in the soil. And so you always want to refill the water through the refill tube. And so on the Grow Bucket kit, what makes it even better than a total DIY version, and this is one of the reasons why we like it, especially if you're going to be doing any kind of projects with folks who are visually impaired or have mobility issues or memory issues, if you're in a memory care facility in particular, because this comes with a water gauge. It's got a little flotation device. It looks kind of like a bubble wand But you can see it's got this little bell that's going to capture a bubble of air and serve as a flotation device down in the reservoir. And then as the water level in the reservoir goes down, this little gauge is going to drop down, and now you know it's time to put more water in there. And then as the water gets filled back up, the little gauge is going to rise back up, so that if you are visually intact and you can look across the yard and see it, or across the way wherever you've got it set up, you can see, oh, I'm good. I don't need to put any water in there. Still got plenty. But if you have a vision impairment of some kind, you can also monitor it because it's got these notches cut into it. And so you can do it tactily as well. And so if you're doing any kind of community service project with people who have vision loss and those kinds of concerns, then this is actually a far more accessible method of maintaining the garden than the DIY version infinitely. Because with the DIY version, you have nothing like this. You have to, the only way you know if you've got enough water in the reservoir is when you see that water is shooting out the drain hole and you know the reservoir is full. So this allows you to monitor the water level in a much better way. And for our folks with memory care issues, this water gauge acts as a visual or a tactile cue, like, oh no, you're fine, you don't need to put water in here. If they can't remember whether they watered or not, the gauge is going to tell them whether there's enough water in the container, and they can just cue off of this. They don't have to rely on their memory at all. And even if they can't remember what this is for, they ignore it. The water can only get so full in the reservoir. The water's going to shoot out the drain hole if they try to overfill it. So there's a lot of strategies that built into all this for the purpose of just being able to easily maintain a garden that can serve as reasonable accommodations for a lot of handicapping conditions as well. And so it's got a universal design component to it. It's a lot more universal than a lot of other gardening kinds of things. And so it makes gardening more accessible to a lot more people who otherwise wouldn't be able to access it. So this is another reason why we like it for the community service projects. It's something that anybody can work with. It's a lot easier to work with than the DIY version when you're actually putting it into practice and using it to grow things. So this is the self-watering container concept that we work with when we're building out a community garden, or we're doing some kind of a community service gardening project. This is the method that we go by because it lends itself to a community service project a lot more than the total DIY version on multiple levels. And so now you can see, and then the side of the box that the Grow Bucket kits come in actually show you how they work. Here you can see the platform is up above the water, and you've got that slope right there that creates the crevice between the inside wall of the bucket and the outside wall of the insert where the soil can fall down. And then it's a little more difficult to see because it's kind of pale, but there's like a little bright green plant growing up from everything with the roots in the area where the soil is, and where it says grow media, soil, or some kind of soilless mix. Like if this is sort of like if you use soil as like hydroponics with dirt in a way. And so yeah, and then you can see the air gap that you have to have, and you have to have your drain hole about a 1/4 inch below where the top of the platform is. You need a 1/4 inch gap of air between how high the water can get, the top of the water, and the underside of the drain plate of the insert, so that there's air circulation and a space for water to drip down from the upper chamber down into the reservoir. You do not want the water coming all the way up to the bottom of that thing. You have to have a layer of air right there. So the placement of your drain hole is very important on the outside of your bucket. And then then it's got that little piece at the top that holds the bubble wand looking water gauge in place, but also anchors it to the side of the bucket so it doesn't wiggle around and get messed up. And then it's got a little plate on the front of it that allows you to, if you can see right here, and it comes with labels that you can label what you're growing in there. I will tell you that a lot of ballpoint pens and Sharpie markers and things like that will quickly fade in the sunlight. And this particular container was put together by our colleague Isabel, who's helped us do some of our other video content for Learn and Grow. And if you've seen Isabel's videos with us, you know that Isabel is blind, and this particular label was run through her Braille printer so that she could read the label with Braille. So that's not going to fade in the sunlight. So that actually gives her a superior outcome than what we would have with it. But between the tactile notches on the water gauge and the braille labels on the little plate there, so to be able to label her bucket, and those were the labels that came with the grow bucket that she used to run it through the label maker, and be able to do the braille, you know, the braille print on it. So she was able to use the labels they sent her to make them into braille labels for the container, which is very cool too. So now that you have a concept of what we're talking about using these self-watering containers and how they work, and you can see how this would be a lot more efficient than doing a bunch of tools and things. Really, for making the drain hole and the buckets for the grow bucket kits, you don't even have to have a power drill, though that certainly works. But you can just as well do it with a lighter and a Phillips head screwdriver. If you're not building that many out, that's, why go hassle with the drill? If you're only going to do like 2 or 3 containers, then it's, do you really need to bust out the power drill for that? But in some places people don't have access to a power drill, and so all they need is something hot and pokey, and they can poke a drain hole and the kit can pop right in, and that's all they really needed to come up with in terms of tools. And so that's another consideration when you're thinking about people who might want to replicate. And if they are able to come up with buckets, which you can often get for free used from restaurants who get their food supplies in 5-gallon buckets, that those buckets just end up in a landfill. And so now you can actually add a recycling element to your community service project if you're recycling used buckets, food safe buckets from restaurants that would otherwise just throw them in the dumpster. And otherwise, you're looking like at up to $9 per bucket to get a new food safe bucket at the hardware store. So, just source your materials wisely and you can do a pretty cost effective program. And if you are going to recycle, especially if you're working with kids and it's like part of the whole thing to teach them something really important about sustainability, then have the kids go around all the area restaurants in town and hit them up for whatever used 5-gallon buckets they've got. And there's all kinds of ways to make self-watering containers from other types of things. This is just like one method of a jillion different ways to do it, specifically geared towards what's the most logistically feasible way to do a community service project with self-watering containers. And so they could experiment, and you can turn it into a whole STEM free for all to figure out all the different kinds of self-watering containers that you can MacGyver from different materials. But in terms of the fundraising mechanism that our program design around the Grow Bucket Kits involves is we have the volunteers donating the self-watering container supplies to a community group and help create its garden. And so, just to use my local Kiwanis Club as an example, I'm a member of my local Kiwanis Club, and they already had some money set aside that they wanted to invest in some type of community service project. And so when I showed up with Learn and Grow, they were like, "That's it, that's perfect." And so, they already had a little bit of money they could commit to this. And so what they did was they purchased the Grow Bucket kits, and Learn and Grow has its own little online Amazon storefront. It's not us fulfilling orders or processing money or anything like that. It's all done through Amazon, and then there's a few little items that are done through other third-party vendors that like for print and ship on demand kinds of things. And so we're not doing any kind of order fulfillment. We're not processing anything. The most we'll get is some little tiny percentage of each sale as an affiliate. And so it's a little fundraising mechanism for us. It helps cover the cost of us doing these programs. And so what we do is the club will purchase the Grow Bucket kits with club funds for the community service project using our link. So we at least get a little sliver of a kickback to help cover our overhead to make the whole thing happen. And then they turn around and use those materials with the kids and the youth leadership programs that we have, the sponsored youth leadership programs. And so we've now had a group, one of these youth leadership groups, build out their own garden for themselves to experiment with as part of their club's activities. And as part of a community service thing, just learn how to do it, because once they learn how to do it, then they can go out and do it for other people. And so the first step is getting them to build their own garden and get a handle on how to grow things with it so that they are able to go out and grow and build other gardens for other people. And so the club bought them the materials to get their first little garden started. And then I went out to the school and worked with all the volunteers from the club. And we taught the kids what explained how everything worked. And the amazing thing was, this was like middle school age kids, was that once we got them the materials and we got out to the space where they were going to set everything up, their school already had a garden, but it was in ground, and they were getting a little spot where they could do the containers and be able to contrast and compare the different growing methods. And so this was like a whole thing. And so as soon as they saw, I presented and explained how the buckets work, they all totally instantly got it. It all totally made sense to them. And when we got outside with all the materials, all us adults just kind of had to step back. And once we had all the materials set up in an orderly fashion, and the kids just like jumped in and started opening boxes and organized themselves and divided the labor without us having to do anything. We just kind of had to get out of their way. And it was a well-oiled machine from the get-go. It was amazing to watch these kids on their own self-organize and execute on this, because every single one of them was invested in it, and every single one of them thought it was the coolest thing they'd ever seen. And they were all excited about the idea of growing food, especially when I was able to show examples of what we do out here at our learning center. And so it was very cool to be able to share that experience. And so that's how we did it. Is that um, the volunteers uh, can go out and do the work, but the club would purchase the materials, or you have some kind of fundraiser. And so one of the ways, especially if you've got an organized club, is you can go around and do like a online fundraising, crowdsource the cost of actually conducting the community service project. You can go around to local businesses and say, hey, would you be willing to sponsor this event? And if you do, we'll put stickers on all these buckets that advertise the fact that this garden was sponsored by your business. And then that gives them an advertising opportunity, and whether they want to regard it as a charitable donation or a marketing cost, either way, they can write it off. And it gives them that exposure of doing something that's really cool that benefits the community with respect to sustainability and food security, which people are increasingly concerned about. And so it shows that, hey, I am addressing the issues of this modern age. I'm not stuck back in time thinking that this isn't really a thing. I get that it is. And I want to be part of the solution. And so an old school model of fundraising for community service events can be recycled and applied here. And I'll give another example from the Kiwanis Club. When I many years ago, when I very first joined, the club actually at the time operated a 5K, 10K race that would raise money to fund scholarships for high school graduates who were, wanting to go on to college. College, they would be college freshmen that next year. And the uh, the club would do like a a program, a brochure that would go into the goodie bag and get handed out to people at the race every year. And all the runners who signed up and paid a fee to run in this race would get a goodie bag with all these donated, trinkets and swag from all of these local stores, like, the local Big Five Sporting Goods would donate something, or there was a local shop that was devoted to running that had all kinds of athletic wear and equipment and stuff and things. And so they would not only host the sign up list, for us, and it'd be a place where people could sign up for the race, but they would also give us swag to go in the bags for advertising. We'd sell ads on the outsides of the bag. We would sell ads in the back of the program. And the program was just pictures of last year's race and the stats and everything, but it was memorabilia and something tangible, and it was a place where advertising could be sold. And then as uh, in the later years when the race was still running, we had a gentleman who moved in from a club in like Pasadena or Burbank or someplace like that, where his club had done a golf tournament to raise money. And what they would do was sell advertising on the signs that would mark the course for the golf tournament. And every time you would get to a hole, there was like, this hole was sponsored by such and such company. And so he's like, why don't we do that on the race? We have to mark the race through town, the trail, so that people don't go running off down the wrong streets. So we have to have these trail markers every so often down the street. Why don't we sell advertising on the trail markers? And so we started doing that. And so there was always a way to get the local businesses involved in supporting the cause and giving them an advertising opportunity at the same time. And when it comes to these buckets, I'm telling you, slap them up with stickers like a NASCAR car. I mean, it's like, you want to be like you want to get that sponsorship, you want to get the support of your community. And so the more fundraising you can do with local businesses, especially if they're donating buckets and stuff, and you can get them involved in what you're doing, then you're going to get their buy-in, and they're going to want to be associated with it. They're going to want their name attached to this good thing that you're doing. And so that's a selling point when you're going out and trying to raise funds for this thing, is it's not going to be in a space where nobody's going to know what they did. There's going to be an opportunity for them to get credit for the help that they're giving to this particular community service project. And it's something for the rest of the community to go, oh, you guys are cool because you actually helped with that. And maybe I want to do business with you. And so, you want to look for these kinds of synergistic relationships where you can. And so that's what that's what we encourage when you're doing a community service project, to think about it in those terms and try to, engage the community in whole and get lots of buy-in, including financial buy-in from local leaders and local business owners. And so that's the presentation part of this. I hope that it's inspired some thoughts for you as to how this can be used to benefit folks in your own communities. And you're certainly welcome to post comments and suggestions and ideas of how this concept could be applied to different types of situations where it could benefit people for various different reasons. There's all types of applications where people can benefit from self-watering container gardening. It can solve a lot of problems under a whole lot of different circumstances. And we're encouraged to hear what people's ideas are about how this can be turned into a community service project that differs from what I've described here, how else this could be tweaked or improved upon or altered to fit a different circumstance. So I'm encouraging you, if you have community service project ideas around this kind of thing, to share, because we want to build a community of problem solvers around this methodology, and we can't do that alone. We need everybody else pitching in too. So I really appreciate you watching this video and look forward to constructive comments that will help create solutions for a lot of people. And if you have any questions, you can always DM us on here on any of our social media platforms, or reach out to us through our website. We have an online chat box that's powered by Facebook Messenger on our website, where you can also chat with us. And so there's always a way to get your questions to us through our online presence. So we appreciate you participating in this and being part of this in this particular video, and look forward to seeing you in our other stuff coming up soon. Take care.